So Nelson Mandela told us that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Our guest today, Reginald Ryder, not only knows this, but he spends each and every day working to instill this concept in students. Reginald tirelessly guides students. He inspires knowledge and curiosity, kindness, and teaches one of the most powerful tools we can possess in our personal toolboxes, self-advocacy. Reginald completed his undergraduate work at Ball State University and received his Master's of Education in Counseling Psychology from James Madison University. Reginald is the founder of Thriving Life Coaching. He believes that every student needs a little TLC. Today, we are so excited to welcome to Touchstone Topics the author of Passing the Baton, a guide and memoir for college success, Mr. Reginald Ryder. Welcome, Reginald. Did we mute you? You're the only one who shouldn't be muted. There we go. Ah. Are you doing it, Diane? Well, we talked about technology, right? So we're gonna make you a co-host, and then that's not gonna be a problem. There you go.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Sorry, Reggie.
No problem.
So,
No problem.
welcome, and thanks for sticking with us while we figured that out.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So to get us started, would you mind sharing just a little bit more about yourself and maybe perhaps include in there as a first generation student, what compelled and inspired you to go to college?
Well, first of all, Emily and Diane, thanks for having me. When I kind of look back and think about what my experience was like in getting ready to go to school, I'm one of 5 and I have a twin sister. And so my parents didn't go to school, but they basically, kind of imparted in us a desire to better yourself and do more and better than what they did. And so that was kind of the impetus, but to say that I really had direction at that point, I really didn't. My oldest sister was in community college at the time. My oldest brother was in the Air Force. My another brother was at another state school, and my sister and I ended up actually going to Ball State together. And so in light of that, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, thought I wanted to be, get the white picket fence and the double-breasted suit, and kind of, at least at the time, LA Law was the show out at that time, and so I was very much into what that was going to look like or feel like for myself. And so I thought, well, you got to do one thing to get to the other, and so this was seemingly for me that next step. But I clearly had no idea or any direction of what that was going to look like or feel like. I obviously found out in some ways, that in some good ways, and at the same time some difficult lessons in the process. But that was kind of the impetus for looking to go to school.
That's awesome. I didn't show the book. I wanted people to see it so that they wanted to pick it up. And this is what we're going to be referencing through this conversation and the next 2 following. And maybe you could expand a little bit on your journey for getting your book published.
Yeah. So actually last June 2019, in a conversation I had with a friend there, I started a little bit of the coaching business at that point with Thriving Life Coaching. And so in the process of it, kind of asked me what I was going to do to get ready. I had been coaching a couple of high school students that winter and spring, and got to the point to where it's kind of like, the year had ended. And so we were basically done. she asked me what I was going to be doing, for the rest of the time. I thought, well, I'll do some things, kind of build the curriculum a little bit. Hadn't really thought about really marketing or anything like that at all. But she said it was not clear for me what I was going to do. So she kind of looked at me. She said, she had the person I was speaking with had just written a book. And she said, maybe you should write a book. And I thought, nah.
That's everybody's dream, right?
Well, it's everybody's dream, but I didn't really see myself in that context I didn't see myself as a writer. Didn't see myself as a person who, I think I've always had something to say, but I didn't know if it was something to say that I put in print or just something that I'd say just for the sake of, saying it. And so as I thought about it, I kind of gave it a little thought, and my wheels got turning a little bit. And so maybe I'll do it. And I kind of put it off and put it off and put it off. And so I went to my company meeting probably a little bit later and had a conversation, very similar conversation with someone about a year prior to that in 2018. And they suggested, a book and kind of helped me, kind of establish or set up a business. Went back, met up with them, had the same conversation and said, what about, what are you doing right now? And I told her about my business a little bit. And I said, someone mentioned I should write a book. And she said, well, what took you so long? And why haven't you, thought about this or considered this a little bit more? And so at that point, I really did take it more serious. My plane ride back from Las Vegas, where I was for my meeting, back to DC, I basically wrote the outline for the book itself. And then I got home and I I told my wife that I was thinking about writing this, and she supported it and was interested. And she was at some point actually became kind of my editor in chief. That's kind of her nickname even now. And what it is that I have produced, everything from emails to to this. And so started writing, started putting some things together. And one of my coworkers offered to read it from, a kind of an outsider's perspective. And so it just kind of blossomed and mushroomed from there. I went on vacation and wrote a whole lot. And then by fall, I had pretty much an idea together, but I hadn't really put together the narrative. I'd written kind of the guide, but not really the narrative about my own story. So I brought that piece into it. And by December, January, like 2019, 2020, I pretty much written it. I got it edited, and then COVID hit. And I thought, well, this is going to kind of throw everything off in one respect or another. And so it actually gave me a little bit more time and a little more bandwidth to be able to do some things that I wouldn't be able to do. So I got to the point of putting all the final pieces together with Amazon and the printer that I used, the distributor I was going to use. And by end of June, so basically about a calendar year, I'd written it and was ready to publish it. And so it was kind of an awkward moment when I saw my first book. I still have the copy of the edited book that I used. Felt like I was kind of holding a new baby, like one of my own two kids, but a third child. But just this one, didn't talk and had something else to say or more to say. So once I did that part of it, the end of June, I was kind of at this awkward moment where I felt like I could put it out to publish it because it was ready, but I wasn't really ready. But I don't know if you're ever really ready to do so. So I finally just press click, and it went out into the ether. And the person who bought my first book was the person who gave me the idea for the book to begin with. Was my pastor, and his wife bought the first book. Yeah. And it kind of mushroomed and blossomed from there to, in ways that I didn't expect and anticipate. So in the first couple of weeks that I'd written the book, it was as a new book, it was considered a top seller in study skills and adult and continuing education on Amazon. And I kept seeing this little ribbon to the side of my book. And I thought maybe it was just, they were just saying that it was new, but it was actually said #1. And I was like, wow. So that threw me for a loop. I wasn't ready for all of that. And it's just kind of mushroomed and blossomed from there to where I'm, talking to you guys today. So
there you go.
It's been a journey, but it's been exciting. And I've really enjoyed every moment. It's been a humbling and exciting experience all at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we're fortunate to have you here, and it's only the end of 2020, so we're in the very beginning. The beginning of your book talks about your own personal journey to get to college and how you didn't have an idea what to do or how to do it or how to get there. Like you said, around your dinner table, your family had some maybe unspoken or just feelings of expectation that you go to college. So when did you know that you didn't know what you were doing, and how did that guide you to do? And I'll just say I recognize that person. So
Sure. In some respects, that may take an hour by itself to talk about, because I really didn't know what I didn't know. I think for me, when it really kind of came to when I understood it was my senior year of high school. In the fall, I got a call from an ambassador from Ball State. It was a student who, they call students and, do work, become part of the process of helping recruit students. So a student could call and said, listen, I'm so-and-so. I'm a student at Ball State. Want to know if you're still interested in going? And I said, yes. And, do you have any questions? I said, no. And, it was it was that kind of deadpan moment where for about 30 seconds, I had no questions, didn't really know what to ask or how to even articulate any of that. And, I hung up the phone, and that was kind of it. I didn't really know what I did know at that point until I went to orientation. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of all the time in between. I kind of had all the steps and all the dressing of appearing to know what I was doing, or at least the impression of such. And I clearly, didn't. I didn't realize until I got to orientation when I heard about, scheduling classes, what the dorm life and experience was going to be like, how you kind of manage or attempt to manage, your time. Those things seem kind of foreign to me in one respect or another. And so it wasn't until, really I got there, I unpacked my bags and my parents left, to go back home, that I realized that I had to kind of get myself together. So, I got a calendar, I got a planner, I had all the window dressing of everything that would have told you that I was ready for that next step, but I clearly wasn't. So I went to class, I did all
window dressing. The
yes.
Window dressing is key, right? Because that's all it was at that point in time for you, right?
So one more time.
The window dressing, that's all it was
yes.
for you at that time.
It was window dressing. I was at college, I had the sweatshirt, I was I was there, but that was it. Into my first few weeks, I kind of from little osmosis and a little bit from what I saw other people doing, started to kind of acquiesce to what it meant to go to school, actually reading the book and going to class and getting the blue theme books that write your responses in for quizzes, tests, and that kind of stuff. Early on, school was pretty easy, but then there's that right at about midterms, you start hitting the wall. And I never really hit the wall in the way of like flunking and that kind of thing, but I wasn't hitting the wall from the standpoint of, I wasn't moving past my own potential at that point. So my first term, I guess I'm happy to say, I'm happy to say that I had a 2.41. I was above, the credentials where you didn't have to worry about, the letter going home to your mom and dad saying, Reginald's got to get it together or he won't be coming back. But I also had my parents saying to me in one respect or another, beyond their academic standards that they have at Ball State, we have our own. So if you're not meeting them, then, we'll give you a semester to think about it. So that too was kind of in the back of my head as well. So again, window dressing with the little admonishment, but at the same time, trying to find my way. And fortunately, I finally did.
Yeah, that's so good. When you were talking about your GPA, I was reflecting on my first term at community college, and I remember walking into a final of a pre-calc class, and I did not have like advanced level math in high school because lovely counselor at that time didn't think I was college material, which is another whole story. I could talk about that. So I'm walking into this final and I didn't even know how to drop a class. And I panicked because I'm like, I know I'm going to fail this class and I need to drop this class. And I remember like just sitting there in the final crying because I knew I couldn't take the test and I knew I was going to fail, but I had no idea how to get out of it.
Right.
So Reggie, I
Yeah.
could have really used you. I could have really
Well,
used you.
that's okay. We're connected now. So if you ever need anything, you just
Yes.
let me know.
Yeah.
We'll take care of it for sure.
Yeah. So I love your description and analogy of the relationship between a student and a college or university. And you use the atmosphere of assistance. The student is the customer or the client, however you
Yep.
prefer. And would you mind kind of expanding on this a little bit, what that means?
Sure. So honestly, this concept really hit me after I got out of school, but it's something that I've kind of always had in my head that I wanted to make sure that I shared this with students. So when I started working in the admissions office at Ball State after I graduated, I really wanted to make it a point to make sure that students understood that their being there was a choice, but their being there really added to the lifeblood of what happens at a college or a university. And I'm not sure where it came from or how it came about, but I was trying to typically when I speak to students, especially in an admissions situation, and that kind of has carried through, I always try and offer analogies, and I always try and offer ways of being able to see it in kind of first person, but in a way that they can relate to. And so one of the students I was talking to at one point, I may have used that whole analogy of, going to a restaurant and ordering a steak and, them sending it back, you ordering it rare and then giving it to you medium well, or even well done. What would you do with that? Would you just eat it because they put it in front of you and settle for it? Or would you actually get what you came for, what you paid for? And you can see the kind of look on the student's face, kind of like, yeah, no, I wouldn't accept that. And nor should I. And I would make sure that someone knew that, I had an issue or concern that I wanted to bring forth and put it in, and give it back to them so that I could get it the way that I wanted. I said, in some respects, although college is a product and a service, ultimately you're a client of that institution. You're the person who, essentially pays our salary, my salary, every fee, every department and service, at the place. You should really get your money's worth out of the experience in every facet of it that you possibly can. A lot of services, which I didn't realize at the time when I was a freshman, but did after I started working there, a lot of the things that are available to you are free. A lot of the things that are available to you are accessible. A lot of the things that are available to you are within the realm of, possibility that you can, utilize on a daily basis, from tutoring to career services to, working with your department on research and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. When I couched it in that way for myself and was able to then offer that kind or that level of communication to the people that I worked with, it made sense to me that you wouldn't settle for anything less than that if you were a customer at a store, nor should you settle for anything less when you're, at a college or university, because as I talk about in the book, that loyal customer, it creates retention. That retention creates some level of loyalty to the institution, and that loyalty then gets, offered or shared as an alumna, whether you come back and participate in activities or you become a part of, the university in one respect or another, whether that's, financial or otherwise. There are ways to being able to give back. And so that too, I think really kind of completes the cycle of a student understanding their importance, because, if 10,000 students leave at a 10,000 seat institution, it would close or have the ability to close. And so, your money, your dollars do mean something. And that was true for me when I was in school, way back when. And even now, it's even more so because obviously the cost of school is going up. The amount of time people are spending in their institutions has increased. And, you want something to show for it so that you can make yourself as marketable as you possibly can and hit the ground running on the other side of what will become either, graduate school or career.
Mhm, mhm. The flip side of that, Reginald, if we can look at that for a second, is the responsibility as a student, because when you're there, it's your full-time job. And so there are certain responsibilities in order for you to get everything that the facility has to offer. You have responsibilities, and that's aside from maybe the expectations that you had from your family. But talk a little bit about how you teach students about their personal responsibility to their own path forward.
Yeah, every institution I've worked at, every student I've talked to, I've tried to impart the fact that, for the next, 9 months out of the year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and ultimately until you finish the semester or the year, this is your full-time work. Financial aid kind of gives you a little money towards that in one respect or another, but really you're working to an end and a means. And doing anything less than that means that you're not getting what you need to get out of it. And so as a person, at least at one point in my life, that didn't really reach my full potential till I kind of understood these concepts for myself, did I really want to make sure that resonated with students? You got to get up every morning. You got to get up every morning and be ready with I can do attitude. You don't know what you don't know, and that's partly true to an extent, but that can't be your reason or your excuse as to why you didn't or don't make some wise choices along the way. As I like to say to students as well, is that you're on your own from the standpoint of being an adult, and in a college environment they will treat you as an adult. So you're on your own, but you're not alone in doing it. And so you have to basically kind of create that those resources and those mentoring opportunities for yourself as a student, like you do when you're out in the working world and trying to network to get to said place in one respect or another. If you can kind of put those skills in place in the context of doing it as a student, those habits become habit forming and get you to an end result that you can be happy with. But if you're not putting those things into practice, then it's going to be hard for you to be able to put them into practice, on the other side. And so I try to impart to students as well as that, if you treat it like your hustle, you won't even, you'll go to school, you'll enjoy school, you'll treat it like, something that you can't do without,
Mm-hmm.
and that you won't do without, because it's so important. And, bottom line, I know for myself, and I'm sure for other students as well, I didn't want to be the brunt of conversation at Thanksgiving because I didn't do it right, or the brunt of conversation at Christmas because, I gave you a gift that you weren't quite expecting. And so it's really important to make sure that if you go into it full throttle, that you'll get full throttle in the way of results.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I know on page 17 in the book, if anybody has the book or when you get it, this is the list kind of that some of the things that Reginald's put together, and you kind of hit on this, is being committed to the process of getting trained and open to new ideas. Sometimes we go in with that stubbornness, right? And the people you interact with, your professors, advisors, deans, administrators, know more than you should listen to wisdom and advice from them. Because right when we're that age, we're so stubborn and we know it all, right? Showing up to work is the only option. There's no day off or missed classes. I love that. No missed classes. Once you miss one, then it becomes easier to just keep missing them, right?
Yeah.
Be
And
a team player. You live among people from all over the world. Always do your best and seek excellence.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just meet expectations, look to exceed them, which is all the stuff that you've just been saying. It's so beautiful. Be on time. Ah, that's so important, right?
Yes,
The
indeed.
classes, everything you do, and be prepared. I love that. You also refer to it, Reginald, as a return on your investment. Can you talk about that a little?
Sure. I know for myself, I was fortunate that my parents were in a position financially to pay for my siblings and I to go to college. And it's not about how much it cost in the true sense of the word, because it was clearly a lot cheaper than it is right now. It's very expensive to go, but at the time, relative to that time, it was expensive. It was more money than I had. I clearly didn't have that kind of money, laying around in a trust or otherwise. Again, I harken back to kind of what I said just a minute ago, is that, you put in, you get out what you put in, and with all the resources and all the services and all the things that are there, you clearly should get, have more to show for it than just, the fact that you have a receipt. You should have, the names of people who are going to be, who can or will be instrumental in your life in that regard, who, meet potentially your business partner, potentially your spouse or partner or otherwise. All those things are things that can or will happen in the process, or potentially in the process or context of going to college, but it's more about the experience itself. I think I remember just being on campus and taking classes from geography to hatha yoga. And,
Perfect.
under normal circumstances, I would have never been in a position or a situation to be able to do some of those things and venture in those ways that I was able to. But I gained something from every experience. And so I really felt like, in that respect, I got my money's worth, or I should say, I got my parents' money's worth in regard to what I was able to, get from it. And not just the degree, but all the experiences. And, there are people even now that that I'm friends with, that I'm colleagues with, that I'm connected through Facebook or through LinkedIn, or individually connected to, all because of the kinds of experiences I had in school. And so, to me, those are, returns on investments that, if you, clearly put in the time and invest some in yourself, that you'll get what you need to get out of the experience in every way. And there are probably a lot of things that I didn't get, that I look back on now and I say, I woulda, coulda, shoulda, but I think we can all say that. But ultimately, do what you can to put yourself in a position to get the most out of what you're putting into it. And, it'll multiply itself in ways that you don't even expect or imagine. Because I would have clearly not written a book. And if you told me at 17, I would have written a book, and I thought, nah,
Yeah.
probably not. But here I am.
Here you are, indeed, and we're so happy. You've been so generous with us, and a good friend. Return on your investment, your responsibility, the university's responsibility. I feel like I could give this book to every graduating, maybe a junior as they're preparing, right, in high school. And I would mark a few pages. One in particular would be the things that get students into trouble. Because you talked earlier, you don't know what you don't know. I think sometimes those trouble spots are the things that kids don't know.
Right.
And I think sometimes their parents try to tell them about it, but they don't want to know. So they don't know, then they get there and there's the trouble. Talk about some of the trouble spots.
My own, or in general?
Well, I don't think it's a freshman right now, and I'm hearing about it. So
Yours are probably somebody else's, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So I'll go general then. I think I think the newfound freedom that students get when they go away, when they leave home, and they're, no one's telling them what to do or how to do it. To me, the biggest obstacle, I think, for most students is their use of time, or their misuse of time, because it is used. There's no two ways about it, but I think a lot of it has the ability or the potential to be abused. And then I think with that abuse comes, the habits that you talk about. So, missing class one time means that on Monday at 8 o'clock when it's cold and it's, the weather's beginning to change, that's an easy time to be able to, stay in and get, a little more snuggle, a little more sleep. That definitely, I think time is definitely a big waster, I think, for a lot of students. I think with the newfound freedom comes, the kind of access to pretty much anything and everything that's, on campus, that's good and bad. That, sometimes means drugs, sometimes that means alcohol, sometimes that means other actions or behaviors that dictate that you really shouldn't be a part of it. But, again, sometimes you get kind of sucked into it and then you can't find your way out of it. I think for a lot of people, it's not necessarily a vice as much as it is just specifically, a chance to rebrand yourself, but because they're homesick or because they're, a little shy or not as, active or engaging or extroverted, that they tend to kind of lay back. And that was part of what I experienced, coming from high school to college, was that, I probably had a lot of opportunities that I could have taken advantage of in high school that I didn't, and saw that same space as kind of finding my own bubble in the same comfort zone. And so I think students being comfortable in their comfort sometimes doesn't lend itself to, all the things that you need to be open to. I think really beyond that is, not knowing how to ask for help. The biggest time waster, in my view, is knowing that you don't know how to do something, going to class, not asking a question, going back home 2 or 3 hours later to do the homework, and you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got to spend the time. There was no YouTube or anything, at least in my day, to be able to kind of figure that out. You either knew it and put forth the effort to get it right, or you didn't, and you either did other homework or no homework. And so, again, those things, have the ability to kind of spiral out of control. I think the other thing too is students don't know the distinction between homework and studying. Homework is kind of the building block to get to the point to where you can study. But if you don't do the homework, what are you studying? You don't really know what it is that you need to know. Something as simple as asking a question is something that I think students in general don't do, and put themselves in a position where, they're in a 300 or 400 room classroom, the professor doesn't know who they are.
We're having a
You can
question.
kind of get away with that. You can kind of get away with that, but you really shouldn't. The people who are teaching you should really know who you are.
What about right now? This is a question from our lovely audience about undergrads in this pandemic time right now. I mean, it's such a struggle. So, and they're making wacky choices, and who knows how it's going to affect them down the road. Do you have some wisdom on that?
Sure. One of the things that I actually got asked this question. I did a seminar with some students at a community college virtually this past fall. And so this was actually a question that someone asked in a different, little bit of a different context. From where I sit, there's Zoom, there's Google Hangouts, there's email, even if you're not necessarily a person who's all that extroverted, an email kind of still gives you that skill and that ability to ask your question or get, the direction that you may need in one respect or another. I would probably opt for, the Zoom call. And it's something as simple as, after class, or maybe setting up an appointment with that professor or that person to say, this is something that I need to know. Is this something that I don't know? Can you help me with this? And not just saying when you do get their time, that you don't just say, I don't know, you give them a little more quantity and quality of what it is that you do know, and then they can kind of fill in the gaps. And then, maybe it's something that you do with them on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Mhm.
What
But
about the idea of them engaging in risky behavior and they're away from home, so they're deciding not to wear a mask or to go to the party and that kind of a thing too, affecting the entire community.
right. And I've had this, I have a daughter who's a junior in college now. And so my wife and I have had this conversation with her as well, that you're really putting yourself at risk, but you're not just putting yourself at risk, you're putting all the other people that you come in contact with or potentially come in contact with at risk. And unfortunately, there have been people who have, college students who have, died or passed away or are in critical condition even now, given that. For me, here's what you do. You put yourself in a position where you can't go home because you're now infected. You're either minimally in a hospital or quarantine. So you can't go home, you can't go anywhere. You're already kind of in a position where you're at odds with kind of all the things that would happen if you get ill and get sick, and it gets to be more dangerous, and your health is at risk in ways that you don't really know or realize. Now you're confined to hospital, and then you can't be visited. So these are the kinds of things that I was saying to my daughter about not going back to college, and she's here with us doing online now, and I know it's a college junior that life's going to happen and things of that sort, but and here's the question, is 8 or 9 months of your life worth the scars that can or could happen in a lifetime if you in fact make the wrong decision at the wrong time. I trust that you'll do the right thing, but I'm not sure about everybody else being masked or being tested or having even the access to testing to be able to find out more or enough about their own health and safety to be able to then not put myself or anybody else at risk. So it's not worth it. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, the peer pressure right now, I mean, it's always amazing. And, under these circumstances, they're probably feeling it even more because you almost have to double down on your resources, right? That reaching out, showing up for those, Zoom office hours, trying to maintain as much of your schedule as possible, even if it's online, to keep you on task, because it's too easy to just not show up right now. And
right, I teach a community college class. It's a college student success class for 8 weeks, and I just finished doing it. I do it at Northern Virginia Community College. And it's a 50-minute class, and they do a hybrid of homework on their own, but I do a lecture for them each week. That there was not a week that went by, with the exception of me giving my students a mental health week, because I could just kind of see the look on their face, and they didn't seem like they really were there and engaged. And I was like, okay, mental health day, I'm going to give you the day off. Here are your assignments you got to do. I'm going to give you an extra day or two to make sure you complete them. But go take care of yourself. And so we came back and said, we'll do this again next week. We did it. It was fine. But there was not a class that went by that I didn't have students who stuck around for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes after to ask, an individual question. And for those students, those are the students who did well and who did best, in the class. Sometimes it meant that, they needed to tell me, about their situation, circumstance that was going on, at home or with work or with, other facets of life. And I also understand in this pandemic that we're in, that none of these things fit within a vacuum, and they kind of are safety sealed, and that's it. They all ripple and mesh into each other in one respect or another. And so from where I sat, it was important for me to be able to hear that, to be able to address it. And sometimes it was an extension, sometimes it was just a little more clarity, but they took the time to do so. And I felt like, as a professor, that I needed to be able to do that very same thing as well. I think if I'm doing that, I know that other professors are doing that as well.
Yeah.
So you just have to tap into it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think more regular check-ins with your student too, that you as a professor, but parents to students. I mean, yeah, so maybe, the contact probably needs to be a little heavier now than in the past. And that kind of takes us into the next question. I know a lot of students are at home right now and they would rather be on campus. We got a mix. But in either case, sometimes there's that homesick feeling. And I know you have a beautiful to-do list about that and how to, establish reasonable expectations for dealing with that homesick feeling when students are away
Yep.
from home. And also from the parents too, right? Parents are
Sure.
kind of challenged in this area too. Yeah.
Yeah, empty nest syndrome is real.
Yeah.
Even if you have others in the nest, there's still one missing in one
Yeah.
respect or another. Um, what I Fortunately, I was an RA when I was in college, and so this was one of the first things that we kind of learned about or talked through. And so typically a student that was experiencing that in one respect or another, I typically tried to do things like, get them and their roommate engaged to where they would at least be in conversation or at least go to dinner together, because a lot of times if you feel like you're the loner or alone, it just creates that much more space, time, and distance between all that you experience in that regard. And so it was important for me to make sure that that happened. Sometimes I would just take them with me. And so I knew a lot of people just because of kind of my own extrovertedness, but also just in general, knowing a lot of people and being able to introduce people to other people. And so before you knew it, within a little bit of time, they, kind of figured it out and, started to make some inroads. But, before classes start, before orientation happens or after orientation happens, and you got all these things kind of going every which way, it is hard to make connections or potentially hard to make connections. So that's one way. Another way is just through the kind of activities that you did when you were in high school or even at your community college where you may have gone. A lot of those activities are there. And so putting them in place, I think gives you a chance and opportunity to be able to extend, what you did in high school into college in a way that is meaningful. And also, even if there aren't things if there are things in your high school that aren't at your college, then it's your chance to kind of shine and kind of bring to pass, an organization or a service or something that's going to give you a sense of belonging to your institution. That's really what you're looking for, is to gain that level of loyalty beyond wearing a sweatshirt, but ultimately to the point to where, you feel like you're connected, not just to the people that are there, but to the institution. And so when those two or three things kind of happen together, that's ultimately what retention boils down to, and being able to make those connections and then, flourishing within them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
That's
quick-
beautiful.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
No, I was just saying it was beautiful. Thanks.
Mhm.
uh, that launches right into a term that you use, ripple and bloom, and the network of support that we need to help people and help kids and help our students understand how to get support, how to use support, and how long to wait before you invite a parent to come visit you. Talk about that
Right.
a little bit.
Well, it's about 4 to 6 weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks, I think, before students actually get to Parents Weekend.
Mhm.
It's timed that way so that you really get the chance and opportunity to really find your way. So when I say bloom and ripple, what I mean by those two terms is there's some ripples that you do want. You want the kinds and layers of support that you can make. And so I kind of liken it to, a splash of a rock in a pond. It does make ripples. As an individual, you want to make a big splash. But as a person, kind of working your way through college, you want smaller ripples. You don't want things to kind of happen to you that are going to, reach the shore and become a wave. You don't want them to do that. You want them to be kind of things that are just going to kind of be calm. So you want your schoolwork and your academic work to be very much under your control, but you want your impact at your institution to be that people, see you, recognize you, acknowledge you for what you're doing or what you're trying to do. A lot of times that, can't happen in the classroom, but, answering questions and things of that sort. A lot of times it can happen in your dorm and in the residence hall that you live in. Should never say dorm. Dorm is where you live, and that's not what I was taught. So residence hall is where, there's a whole lot more going on and happening. But all that said, your ability to make an impact and your ability to be, to begin to create your network is how you really do that. Putting yourself in a position to be able to do that then means that if you're again, an analogy, if you kind of plant yourself as a seed at your institution, that if the right people and the right conditions, nurture you in the way that they need to, you'll be, a bit of a seedling as a freshman. But by the time you finish, either after a year or over the span of your academic career, you'll hopefully be, known by the fruit that you produce. And so given that, you have to find those balances. And so minimizing those distractions, minimizing all that kind of negative energy and negativity in general with risky behaviors, hopefully puts you in a position where you're able to get the most out of it. That is your return on your investment. That is a loyal customer or an alumna in one respect or another. And it's also, you putting yourself in a position to be ready to, take on the next, the next challenge that comes your way. And so the ripple really is, the impact that you want to make, but the visibility that you want to be seen and known by, and that you're, kind of calm and cool and collected in that respect, but really put yourself in a position to be able to be recognized by the fruit you bear.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. So, Reginald, Warren Buffett has a quote. It says, it's better to hang out with people better than you because you'll drift in that direction. And you talk about authenticity in your book and staying true to yourself. And this kind of rolls along with what you were talking, about creating your network and choosing.
Uh-oh.
I lost you.
Emily's a little frozen. Maybe Reginald, we can launch off from the beginning of that. The meat of the matter was Warren Buffett's quote, "It's better to hang out with people better than you and they'll elevate you." So maybe we can take off.
So one of the things that my
You guys are frozen now. Are we all
back?
unfroze? Are we all unfroze?
I'm good now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Did you hear the Warren Buffett quote?
I did, and
Okay.
Diane actually picked up for you. So
Okay.
you guys are
Yeah,
done.
and then just on that, you talk about staying true to yourself, and
Yep.
and I know before we came on, we were talking about the whole authenticity component to things, and there is a lot of pressure, and we know that we want our kids to choose wisely, right? But how do they do that with all the pressures?
Well, I'm convinced that, at least for myself, I say it this way, positive people beget positive people. And, ultimately, if you're the smartest person in the room, then move to the next room. I think much like, Warren said in his quote, it's, I guess for me, I just don't want a lot of drama in my life if I can help it. I keep a pretty low profile in that respect. And even if I hear negativity if there's something I can glean from it where there's a lesson to be learned from it, then that's probably the most that I'll take from it. But in the way of just that being part of my existence, I try not and attract it. I try not to hang with it. And if I see it and feel it, it's my spider senses go out pretty quick. I feel like I can recognize it. I was able to surround myself with people who, wanted the same things out of life that, that I wanted. And some of them became, my study buddies and were people who I hung with in that regard. And so it was important for me to it was important for me to be around the right people in order to get the right lessons and be able to offer some myself. So I think sometimes we forget that we have the capacity to be able to teach and learn at the same time. It's not always a one-way street. And I really kind of picked that up even from, honestly, from the my time and my experiences with being a study buddy. I have a pretty good memory. And so for me, being able to remember, where I saw something on my page of notes when we were trying to go through and study for a test, I could recite it and remember it. But so in that respect, I was learning when I was teaching, and it was kind of embedded in my head. You can't teach something that you don't know. That's, the other part of it. But the other part of that is that listening is just as important. And I've always been told, or always been offered, that you listen for understanding. You don't listen just to talk, so you can hear yourself talk anyway. And so again, I think doing little things that I didn't realize then, but that I realize now, put me in the position to be able to do some of the things that I was able to do. I'm happy that I was, receptive to it in all the ways that I needed to. And there are probably some things that I missed out on. I'm sure that there are and that there were, but I'd like to think the majority of what I got from what I gained from my experience at college in one respect or another was more of a sponge than that of a rock.
Well, there's always more to learn, right? Always.
Exactly. All the answers are, as my dad likes to say, all the answers are still out there. So you got to go find them.
Yeah,
I love it.
especially the ones you don't already have, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Reginald, our time is winding down, and it's been such a joy and a pleasure. You've been so generous with your time and your friendship, and your spirit is just so enthusiastic and lovely and delightful. And Emily and I have learned a lot from you. We are learning and teaching all the time too, and we always strive to be listening to learn. It's just something that every human should strive to do more of, I believe personally. So thank you. I think that this is something that every young aspiring college student absolutely should read, and it's very readable. I want to tell the audience that if they haven't read it yet, it's very readable. And the beautiful thing is Reginald has agreed with us to be that we only covered the first 3 chapters of this delightful book. And so the rest of the book will be in 2 new, another different coming up installments.